There are plenty of films that are terrible ideas, but today we're talking about the most terrible idea for a film ever. Nothing like it will ever be made again, and for good reason, because during its production, this film led to 70 to 100 people being injured. And how were these people injured? Well, for the most part, they were mauled by 150 big cats. We're talking lions, tigers, jaguars, cougars, the works, running around completely untrained and untamed. This is the movie Raw, which stars a very notable celebrity family who every day put themselves and the crew in danger to make a terrible movie. And they were all hospitalized numerous times, with some of the shots ending up in the finished film. Believe it or not, this is meant to be a comedy film, but after watching it, I can safely say that it definitely feels like more of a horror. And every behind-the-scenes aspect that I learned, it makes the film seem worse and worse. Most of these scenes, these people are genuinely fearing for their lives. Unlike these big cats, we're only scratching the surface here, so come along with me on this journey, strap on in, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. We're gonna be talking all about the people behind it, the injuries, all the behind-the-scenes drama, the actual very loose plot of the film, and what happened to all those crazy cats after the movie was complete. So the film was conceived by married couple Noel Marshall and Tippi Hedren. So you might not know these people now, but there's a good chance you'll recognize them a little later on in the video. We got the idea for the movie when they were shooting a completely unrelated film in Africa. Here they witnessed the pride of 30 lions move into an abandoned house, and they thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a movie about this? And it turns out, it wouldn't. Injuries aside, making this film, they went over 5 times the initial planned budget, resulting in the film being described as the most expensive home movie ever made. So it wound up costing about $17 million. Now, adjusting for inflation to match the present day, we're looking at close to $100 million. The family sold pretty much everything they owned to finance this film, including all 4 of their properties. Something sunk cost fallacy. Every single member of the family was hospitalized by these big cats, including all 3 of their children. Literal blood, sweat, and tears went into the making of this film, and of course the film ended up making a catastrophic loss. The goal was to finance the retirement of the big cats. Obviously that didn't quite happen. They also planned to film for only about 6 months, but filming ended up going for closer to 6 years. From writing the script and adopting the first cat to the release of the film, we're looking at an 11-year production for the movie. When they first started this, they were looking to have 20 or 30 lions in the film. When they pitched this to professional animal trainers, they all said it was impossible and that they weren't going to do it. That amount of big cats together was too risky, especially 2 males together. None of the animal trainers wanted to risk their cats. So the family went out and accumulated close to 150 big cats of their own. They bought them from zoos, circuses, essentially wherever they could get them. Many of the baby cats, or big kittens, were raised in their own home. When animal control came knocking, they used to have to take the cats and throw them over the neighbor's fence so they wouldn't get caught. I believe the first big cat that they raised was Neil. They raised him to adulthood in their own home. He would sometimes sleep in the same bed as their 13-year-old daughter. It was this experience raising Neil that gave them such a false sense of security regarding the dangers of big cats. It seems silly to say. Obviously, we know to stay away from those guys, but for some reason, it just didn't click with these people. Hollywood's a crazy place. They also didn't just limit themselves to big cats. They got all kinds of animals. We're talking swans, flamingos, cranes, storks, elephants. They even got the scariest animal of all, Canadian geese. It honestly really does just feel like animal hoarding, especially when you combine it with the fact that this film bankrupted them. Early in the production, the upkeep for the crew and the animals was $4,000 a week. Again, adjusting for inflation, that's closer to $30K. And again, this is early in production. They accumulated the animals as time went by, so it likely went much higher. This film is truly disaster after disaster of biblical proportions. I'm talking floods, there was fires, there's disease. At one point, all of the lions escaped. Elephants were... Hey, are you even listening to me right now? Or are you just looking at my cool shirt? Well, stop looking at it. It's private. Alright, fine, I'll tell you a little bit about it, but only because it's from Cool Shirts, the sponsor of today's video. I personally have loved Cool Shirts for years now, so I'm really excited about this. I love their unique brand of humor, and I get tons of compliments when I wear their stuff. They've got a whole range of aesthetics, from when you're ready to take on the world, to when the world's feeling a little too much. From bright and colorful to dark and gothic, there's a shirt for every occasion. The quality is also always amazing. Check out the embroidery on this sweater. Even to the smallest details, you can tell that a lot of thought has been put into this. And as an avid connoisseur of beanies, I can safely say that genuinely their beanies are my favorite that I own. Super comfy, they got a great thickness, some even have a little spooky surprise. And it's not even limited to just clothes. They've got water bottles, they've got desk mats, including one that you can measure a fish on, jewelry, bags, all kinds of stuff. Again, I've been buying stuff from them for years. I genuinely love it and I can't get enough. So check it out, I've got a link in the description, and you can use my code for 10% off. That's shirts with the z.cool/toddy. Now let's look at the main players. It does get a little bit confusing at times here. Not so much of a family tree we're gonna look at here, It's more like a family web of nepotism. We'll start with Noel Marshall, who wrote, directed, starred, and produced in the film we're talking about today. But prior to all this, he and his ex-wife ran a talent agency. They had 3 children together, but they ended up getting divorced. One of his clients at the talent agency was William Peter Blatty, who is the author of The Exorcist. It was through him that he became a producer on the film version of the novel. Through The Exorcist, he made a decent chunk of cash. Another one of his clients was Tippi Hedren, who he would later on go to marry. But who's Tippi? She was originally a model throughout the 50s, but then in 61, she received a call from none other than Alfred Hitchcock. He had seen her in an unspeaking role in a commercial for the diet drink Sago. After watching that, he immediately told his people to find her. She would then go on to star in his next film, The Birds. If you don't know what The Birds is about, it's essentially a horror film where all the birds start attacking people. Living in Australia, I can relate to that. When he offered her this role, he locked her into a 7-year exclusive contract. If this all seems a little weird, it's because it is. She had essentially 0 acting experience at this point in time, and he had just come off making the film Psycho. He pretty famously became obsessed with her. Allegedly, other cast members weren't allowed to touch or talk to her while the cameras weren't rolling. He commissioned a replica mask of her that was not needed at all for the film. His office had a connecting door to her change room. Just generally sus and gross all around. And when she ended up rejecting his advances, the set reportedly became a lot more dangerous for her. One scene in The Birds has her locked in a room with a bunch of birds that attack her. For the most part, up until this point, they had used mechanical birds instead of real birds. But for this scene, he decided to switch it up on her. Instead, they literally threw live birds at her. Some of the birds they even attached to her clothes. These birds genuinely attacked her. And the amount of time it took to film this scene, 5 whole days. She ended up also starring in his next film, Marnie. During this one, she claims that he became increasingly cruel. And kind of by the end of it, she demanded to be released from her contract, and of course, he said no. And then he proceeded to ruin her career permanently. She was made unhireable due to other directors not wanting to be on Hitchcock's bad side. It was around this time that she married Noel Marshall. He produced 3 of the next films that she would star in: Mr. King Street's War, The Harad Experiment, and of course Raw. I'm gonna be honest, after finding out that she was the person from The Birds, I couldn't help but draw connections between that and Raw. It feels like they were trying to maybe recreate it on a more impressive scale, because, you know, instead of birds, it's lions, and then also make it more accessible to a wider audience by promoting it as a family comedy rather than a horror film. But you can't make a film about lions and eat it too. The other stars of Raw include Jerry and John Marshall. Those are 2 children from Noel's first marriage. The eldest brother ended up working on the production as well, but behind the scenes. And the film also starred Tippi Hedren's daughter from her first marriage, Melanie Griffith. Now, you may have heard of her as well. She's pretty famous in her own right. Now, Melanie's first husband was Don Johnson, who she met on the set of The Harad Experiment. It was one of his first roles, and again, it was produced by Noel and starred Tippi. When they met, she was 14, and he was, 22. They moved in together when she was 15, and they got married on her 18th birthday. Yeah. Not good. They divorced the same year, but then she went on to marry Stephen Bauer, then years later, remarried Don Johnson. She then ended up having a child with him, and that child is Dakota Johnson. I don't know about you, this blew my mind. Hey, remember when I called this a family web? More like a family Madam Web, you know? Because she is in, Madam Web. Then after that, Melanie Griffith got married to Antonio Banderas. This is crazy. Isn't Hollywood crazy?
Who was your first celebrity crush? Oh, Jesus. He's sitting right here.
We started with Alfred Hitchcock watching morning television, and now we've got Madam Web, and she's dating Chris Martin from Coldplay. What a world. But this doesn't end with the humans. No. Even some of the big cats have interesting Hollywood relations. For example, Togar. He's one of the antagonists of the film, and he was previously owned by Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Apparently, Togar was very cute when he was little, but as he grew, he became more and more unruly, and his roars would keep the neighbors awake at night. So Anton LaVey was forced to donate him to a zoo, and then from the zoo he was bought by Noel and Tippi. That being said, he was apparently too mean, and he had to be switched out for a different lion during production. The Satan Cat was a little bit mean, who would have guessed? But if he was one of the mean ones, you know he had to be pretty bloody mean, because the injuries on this film were a lot. Cinematographer John de Bont, who would go on to direct films like Speed and Twister, was scalped by a lion named Cherries. He required 220 stitches. Tippy's ankle was fractured when she was picked up by an elephant, which led to her contracting gangrene. She was also bitten on the head by a lion. Melanie was at first apprehensive to be in the film. She left pretty early on and they replaced her with a different actress. Then she got major FOMO and wanted to come back, so they had to reshoot all the scenes. She initially left because she said she didn't want to lose half her face to a lion, but then she almost did. She almost lost an eye and she required facial reconstruction surgery. Young was bitten by a lion on the back of his head and the lion refused to let go. It took 6 blokes 25 minutes to pry the lion off of him. The assistant director was bitten on the throat and jaw. That's a miracle he was okay. Jerry was bit through the thigh, and Noel, oh, Noel. Very early on in the film, he's bitten on the hand by a lion. That is a real wound he received. This happened on the first day of shooting. They then added that into the script and it became a plot point. That's how loose this script is. For continuity reasons, he had to wear a bandage on his hand for the rest of the film. There's another scene where he's in the bath with a lion, and while they don't show this in the film, that lion ends up dragging him out of the tub by his neck. This dude got attacked and bitten so many times, it's almost unbelievable that he came out of this okay. The dude got gangrene, blood poisoning. It took him years to heal from the extent of his injuries. To this day, people who worked on this film still have PTSD-like symptoms. Yet all of these people stayed for the entire production. But again, this absolutely could have gone so much worse. So lions are pretty notoriously lazy. They sleep for about 21 hours a day, and they're mostly operating at night. Tigers also are mostly nocturnal. Sometimes after full days of shooting, they wouldn't have any film to work with. They had to do things to deliberately agitate the animals, to stir them up to get them to perform. They found that riding a motorcycle would get the animals to chase it. That Togar was pretty sweet until he was around a female. They would separate the female from him and then he'd go ballistic. And one of the biggest things was expressing fear around the cats. If you were confident, you supposedly had not much to worry about. If you show fear, then you do. And of course, the premise for this film is a lot of people acting afraid. It's a terrible combination, and it's just a miracle that everyone lived throughout the experience. A lot of the time, they didn't have to express fake fear. The fear they're feeling is very real. A lot of the time, the crew was pressured to not intervene or to stop filming in case it affected Noel's vision. He was supposedly a tyrant on set. He was not a good dude to be around. Cast had safe words in case things got sketchy. One of these safe words was literally just saying Noel, as in Noel Marshall's name. A lot of the time though, specifically with Tippy and Melanie, he would ignore the safe word and just keep filming. Because of this, the two would try and film a lot of the time with the brothers because they were actually able to stand up to Noel. There's a scene that's actually in the film where you can hear Melanie saying the safe word. Watching the film, it sounds like she's just saying no, but if you listen closely, she's definitely saying Noel. Tragically, a lot of this experience is very similar to Tippy's time on The Birds. I honestly can't imagine the kind of person you have to be to constantly every day endanger the lives of your family and then know you're gonna do it all again the next day for literally years. Thankfully, all the cats were unharmed. You can tell because the opening of the film brandishes a seal of approval from the American Humane Association. Although some scenes appear to show animals being injured, they were never actually hurt. They even playfully allude to the fact that the animals were so untrained and so wild that they deserve their own riding credits. Specifically Robbie, Gary, and Togar. Now this all sounds well and good until I found out that midway through production, Robbie was shot dead by police. During the production, there was a massive flood that wiped out the whole set. Film, editing equipment, even some of the crew needed to be rescued. It also destroyed the fences. During this, 15 lions and tigers escaped, and 3 got done in by the cops. So for half of the film, Robbie is played by a different guy, which would make you wonder how this film ever got the Humane Association's seal of approval. Well, it turns out that doesn't mean what I thought it meant. When a movie says no animals were harmed during the making of this film, it doesn't quite mean that. It does, I guess, on a technicality. Apparently that just means that none of the animals were harmed deliberately while the cameras were rolling. Maybe I've misunderstood something here, because it doesn't sound right. Also during filming, there was 14 wildfires and an airborne disease that took out 14 of the cats. What a bloody nightmare. The only person seemingly unscathed by this whole film was Motivo, who was played by a guy named Motivo. His rule was that he only would be around the big cats when he absolutely had to. and that worked out really well for him as far as I know. He's also probably my favorite character. He's definitely the least annoying. Alright, I'm gonna break down the plot, but it's pretty loose. You can definitely tell they were making up a lot of this stuff as they went along, and that the animals themselves definitely made a lot of the decisions in this. The film opens in Africa. The whole film takes place in Africa, but this bit was actually filmed there. The rest was filmed in the US. Hank, played by Noel, is doing some doctoring in a village, which is never brought up again, and he leaves on a motorcycle and starts racing the local wildlife. Heads home, which is surrounded by lions, but for him, it's chill. That's just how he lives his life. He's quirky like that. This is the bit that's filmed in the US. They imported all these trees and plants to make it look more like Africa, but they would only be this color for 5 months of the year, so a lot of the year, for continuity reasons, they couldn't even film outside. At one point, they even got the eldest son to paint the leaves outside to make things look more consistent. Meanwhile, his family arrives at the airport. You can tell it's Africa because there's an ostrich. So Tippy plays Madeline, while Melanie, John, and Jerry play Melanie, John, and Jerry. Very creative. They haven't seen Hank in 3 years because he got a grant from the university to study big cats. Now, you may notice that a lot of the big cats in this film are not native to Africa, but they throw in a couple lines explaining this. Essentially, he just brought them over to study. Nativo's there to go pick him up in his boat so they can pick up his family before the committee to review the grant arrives. Nativo, just like his real-life counterpart, is pretty sketched out by the big cats. Instead of leaving, they just end up walking around the property for a while. Here we're introduced to Robbie, who is the top cat. He's just constantly hyping up Robbie about how much of a gentle and kind, loving leader he is.
He's the boss! I worked for him! Hey, Rob! Wow!
Rest in peace, Robbie. Rest in peace. The committee arrives and Hank kind of just lays out the message of the film, but it's extremely muddled. He talks about protective native environments, but also he brought over all these exotic species. It's about not exterminating things that we fear, but also they end up implying that we shouldn't be afraid of these animals. They clearly didn't know what they were doing here. A member of the committee, Prentice, hates this. He even threatens to flat out shoot the tigers because they don't belong in Africa. The lions then end up getting in a fight and Hank jumps in to intervene. This is the scene where he receives that very real hand wound. What are you doing, man? Stay away from those guys. Let the lions sort it out. Now, I gotta be careful showing some parts of this on YouTube, so just so you're aware, some parts I won't be able to show in full, but I will describe. He ends up going inside his house to bandage up his hand, which of course is full of lions. Some lions then fight a tiger. Obviously, in like a real world sense, this is terrible. These are animals that would never interact in the wild. Tigers are not from Africa. Lions are also accustomed to living in big social groups, while tigers are predominantly solitary animals. So this whole scene would have been pretty stressful for the poor guy. He's getting bullied. The tiger then starts sinking the boats of the committee, and then he attacks them in the water. It's genuinely scary, but again, this is meant to be a comedy. There's a lot of blood in this scene. Hank comes out to protect them, but they all end up just fleeing on boats. I'm pretty sure they won't be renewing the grant, but we'll never know because the grant is never addressed again. Meanwhile, the family is still waiting at the airport. It's about to get dark, so they end up getting a bus that's going to bring them closer to the house. For some reason, Hank is not concerned at all about picking up the family that he hasn't seen in 3 whole years. Chats to Gary, who ends up biting his very real wound. He mops the house, he has a bath. Lions come back inside and then start attacking Nativo. Very funny. They have a drink together, the lions fight more. Go pick up your family. What are you doing, man? Finally, they go and take a boat to pick up the family. But 2 tigers come along, which causes the boat to sink. Meanwhile, the family has just made it to the house all by themselves. Thankfully, nothing bad happens to them because all the big cats have despawned. They explore the whole house and there's no big cats in sight. It's a little musty inside, so they open up all of the doors and windows. This loads in a new chunk because all the lions suddenly spawn in and drag a zebra carcass into the house. It's a zebra. I said zebra for the Americans. I normally say zebra. You're welcome. Fun fact, for this scene, they waited a 1.5 years for a zebra to die of natural causes, but that never ended up happening, so they painted a donkey. The family then scampers around the house Scooby-Doo style. Everywhere they turn now, there's big cats. They hide wherever they can, and then the lions literally paint the house in blood. I can't show any of this. This whole bit is so sketchy. The lions then start trying to pry open all their hiding places. They're fully just tearing the house apart. This is like majority of the film. This is what the film is. And if you thought these cats were bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. Togar shows up at the house and he starts doing a full Jack Nicholson. The dude is busting down doors, things are looking bad for the family. But who shows up to save them? Well, of course, it's Robbie. I think. I don't know, really, to be honest. I assume it is. And he saves them. Togar leaves. Meanwhile, Hank and Motivo are having a casual little bike ride to the airport. And Prentice decides he's going to go back to the house and start blasting cats. Motivo ends up hanging from a tree to distract the cats, so Hank can go faster to meet his family at the airport. Day becomes night, and Hank finally works out that his family isn't there anymore. So he borrows a car and starts traveling home. It's now suddenly daytime, and he comes and picks up Motivo, meaning that he left Motivo in a tree overnight while his family was fending for their lives in his own home. This is the worst character in fiction. What kind of person would have so little care for his family and put them in this kind of danger? Oh yeah, that's right, the real life guy. This scene where they're driving with the tigers, it took them 7 weeks to shoot this. This is one of the parts where they actually had to train an animal to do something. It's also over super quickly because Hank instantly ruins the car, and then they gotta walk again, because Hank can't do anything right. Back at the house, while the big cats are distracted by the luggage, the family uses this as an opportunity to sneak away. So they hop into a boat and start paddling away. They are terrible at doing this, like bafflingly bad. This bit though is probably my favorite bit in the whole movie. I thought this specific bit was really cute. They really do just be big cats. This all culminates with an elephant destroying the boat in an honestly really impressive display. It then picks up Madeline and tosses her around. This is the scene that caused Tippy's real life injury. You can see the shot here. They actually play it backwards. This elephant is so grumpy with this boat. I honestly wonder how they got him to act like this, probably on Monday. They go back to the house and John finds a motorcycle, so he races off to go find help. As I'm sure we all remember, riding a motorcycle triggers a reaction from the cats. What I didn't mention is that it also triggers a reaction from the elephants. This very chaotic scene, he ends up racing all around their house and then he ends up flying off the roof. Next is a scene that gave me claustrophobia and I don't want to relive. Meanwhile, Prentice and his mate are making their way to the house, blasting any big cat that they see. At this point, I'm kind of rooting for the guy to get to the house and save the family, because that's what a normal movie would be. Don't get me wrong, I freaking love big cats and I want no harm to come to any of them. But this film is so muddled in the message that it makes them seem like a very real problem here. These guys have tried to eat every single character except for Hank. And even then, they did attack Hank. They painted a house in blood. In any other film, Prentice would be the hero at this point. Saying that this film promotes the preservation of big cats is like saying that Jaws promotes the preservation of sharks. It just doesn't, it's just not coming across that way. Madeline gets her head covered in honey, which a big cat licks off her. For her, she said that this is one of the scariest scenes that she had to shoot. They literally turned her into food. The film just becomes pure chaos. It's honestly, it's not fun to watch. It just is anxiety inducing. And I love horror films, I love them, but this is not it. The family eventually escapes to a house about 20 meters away. They feel so comfortable that they escape the threat that they decide to lie down and sleep because they're so exhausted. Yeah, the plot, it's a bit thin here. As the family is sleeping, Togar murders Prentice and his mate. This scene was surprisingly gruesome and it is sudden. It's kind of out of nowhere. Hank scares him off, but it's too late. They're gone and in pieces. What a funny comedy film. But as we remember, Togar's not the only threat here. There's other big cats too. As this happens, the family is woken up by, you guessed it, more big cats. But what's this? They're cuddling, and there's baby lions? That's so cute. We love big cats now. Big cats are super cool. They're actually just friendly little guys. They're so fun and cute and friendly, and they're absolutely no danger at all. This is amazing. Forget about the last scene. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. Don't worry about the tonal whiplash. Don't even worry about that. The fun is disrupted when Togar arrives, followed by Hank. This is where Robbie returns and has one final fight with Togar. One final fight to end it all. But then they nuzzle, and they're now friends. Aw, Togar, what a little sweetie. He was a sweetheart all along. Just forget about the fact that he ate people mere minutes ago. Hank reunites with his family, and it's all very nice. He then tells Motivo not to tell his family that the lions just ate a couple guys, and then they have a montage of the fun times with cats. What? Alright, feels like we were lacking a little bit of closure there. So as I mentioned before, this film was a huge box office failure. Now, part of the reason behind this is because it didn't actually receive a release in the US. There's been a couple of reasons presented as to why this was. The main reason presented being that they didn't use unionized workers while making this, in order to save on costs. So that kind of checks out. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff makes a little more sense now. It actually had its premiere in Sydney, Australia. Was I at their premiere? You decide. Reportedly, the regions it was most popular in were Japan and Germany. Funnily enough, in these areas, it was promoted as being a scarier film, as opposed to everywhere else, where it was promoted as being a family comedy. Now, pretty much immediately after the film's release, Tippi and Noel got a divorce. She even got a restraining order against him. Noel went on to never write or direct anything ever again. He left show business, moved to Florida, and passed away in 2010. It sounds like he didn't really do anything with big cats ever again. Tippi, on the other hand, stayed very true to her word about caring for these cats. She clearly feels pretty awful about the whole production and has some major regrets. After production, she set up a non-profit organization and also Shambhala Preserve. It's a big cat rescue that still operates to this very day. She even still runs it at 94 years of age. Melanie and Dakota Johnson reportedly still help out, although more recently they turned down ever running the thing. Tippi has talked about on numerous occasions how stupid she feels about literally this whole thing, and how awful she feels about putting her daughter in such dangerous situations. When Raw was being re-released in 2015, she took absolutely no part in any of the promotion of the film. John Marshall talked about this fact in an interview. I think the reason Tippi isn't really participating is because this is against everything she is now preaching at Shambhala, which is that these are wild animals and they're not supposed to be living with people. She even helps pass a law in Congress about this, the Captive Wildlife Safety Act. Not one more human adult or child should be maimed for life or killed by a big cat. Not one more big cat should be abused by being born into captivity under the misunderstanding that they will be a good pet, or be brutalized for doing tricks for our entertainment. For me, I think this is the most interesting part about this whole thing. She's done a complete turnaround. After making this film, she dedicated her life to making sure that big cats in the US would all live better lives, and also made sure that a film like this could never be made again. The whole film is incredibly weird. It's not good by any means, but it is incredibly interesting to watch. Seeing people interact with real animals like this certainly is fascinating. Personally though, I'm really glad that animals cannot be used like this in films anymore. So I'm making the commitment now that every like this video gets, I will release one of my tigers back into the wild. You like cats? Check out my Garfield video.